Hey, why do you have the latest game console? Oh, Max wanted it, so I bought it. What? Why do you have so much money? I withdrew it from our joint account. Huh? Why did you do that? It's fine. It's marital property after all. My husband has been distributing the inheritance in each case. But honestly, it's not that much. Therefore, if my husband continues to spend money as he currently does, the funds will eventually run out. Since our son also intends to go to college in the future, tuition will be needed as well. In such a situation, I am seriously concerned about whether we can make a living in the future. My name is Nicole. I am a 43-year-old office worker. I have been married to Sean for almost 15 years now. Our son, Max, is currently 17 years old and attends high school. In fact, our son is my husband's child from a previous relationship. My husband had a previous spouse who disappeared right after giving birth. After his ex-wife disappeared, he took care of his son alone with support from his parents. Then one day, a completed divorce application arrived and he had no choice but to divorce. After some time, we started dating and eventually got married. At the time, our son was 2 years old and recognized me as his real mother. There was deep affection between Sean and me, and our son also felt close to me. So we decided to marry early and build a family. Thus, we became a couple. Despite what happened with the ex-wife, his parents warmly welcomed me. Nicole seems trustworthy. Unlike the previous wife, she doesn't have instability. Honestly, I wasn't too surprised when she suddenly disappeared. My mother-in-law said this calmly, and I admired her mental strength. With the support of my in-laws, I felt that the first experience of parenting would go smoothly. Since our son is also fond of his grandmother, she could offer advice if needed. Thus, our married life began. Our son was adorable, and our newlywed life with my husband was fun. The initial phase of marriage was truly happy. Our son grew up healthy, and the relationship within the family was good. Every day was enjoyable. When busy with work, my mother-in-law came to help, and the family supported each other through various challenges. I believed our happy days would continue indefinitely, but unexpected events happened suddenly. What? You were laid off? This happened about 10 years after we got married. Due to the economic downturn and worsening management, the company my husband worked for implemented a massive layoff, and unfortunately, my husband was one of them. Damn it. Why was I laid off? For my husband, the news of being laid off was a huge shock as he had not anticipated it. Did you ask your boss to reconsider? Of course, I tried. I also asked for the reason. They said it would be okay because my wife earns well. They told me there's no problem with our income because you work for a big company. Oh, apparently, my high income was the reason my husband was put on the layoff list. Knowing this fact, I was engulfed in complex emotions. I felt guilty, but I had worked hard in job hunting, joined my current company, and worked as an employee to increase my salary. Currently, I hold a managerial position, have subordinates, and am working as hard as I can. It's hard to accept that my efforts are seen in a negative light. But you know, if the management is bad, the company might eventually go bankrupt. It's a chance to change jobs earlier. Let's think positively. That's true. Although my husband's expression was gloomy, he tried to change his mood with my encouragement. However, when nothing seems to go right, nothing progresses as hoped. He seems to be struggling to find a new job. Even when trying to find a workplace that offers a salary equivalent to his previous one, he's not successful. When I suggested, how about considering a lower salary level? He exploded in anger, asking, "Are you mocking me? I don't mean it that way, but it's going to be tough if you can't find a job. Seeing my husband suffer like this is unbearable for me. That's why I hoped he would decide to re-employ even if it meant accepting a lower salary and start working actively again." After many discussions, I encouraged him to take interviews at various companies. However, that attempt also failed. Even when considering lower salary levels, he wasn't hired. Gradually, my husband's mood became more volatile. "You're the one who said to think about lowering the salary. And yet, it's completely useless. Are you trying to embarrass me? He yelled at me, overwhelmed by anger. Facing such unjust anger, I too was at a loss. However, my husband had no one but me to direct his powerless anger at. Therefore, he decided to give up on regular employment and instead started working part-time. For me, having even a little income is far better than clashing with my stressed husband. But unfortunately, misfortunes seemed to follow one after another. It was sudden, but my father-in-law passed away due to illness, leaving us speechless. The suddenness of it meant neither my husband nor I could catch up with our emotions. When we rushed to the hospital, my father-in-law had already passed away and was lying on a bed covered with a white cloth. Dad, why? We always appreciated my father-in-law's kindness, and his death brought deep sadness. An emotional outburst at the funeral was inevitable, and we shed tears. Mother, are you okay? Yes, I'm sorry to worry you. I never thought my husband would pass away first. He always said he didn't want to be left behind. He promised me, don't worry, I'll see you off. And yet, he broke that promise. My mother-in-law was deeply disappointed at losing her beloved husband. Our 12-year-old son understood the concept of death and mourned his grandfather deeply. Since then, I began visiting my mother-in-law regularly. I did so because I didn't want her to feel the loneliness that often comes with living alone. Nicole, thank you always. But aren't you pushing yourself too hard? You seem pale. No, it's nothing. I'm just a bit busy with work. I replied to my mother-in-law's concern like that. But in reality, I felt a significant burden. My husband, while only working as a part-timer 2 or 3 days a week, didn't help with household chores at all. As a result, I had to take on all household duties in between my busy work schedule, sometimes even while working overtime. My growing son had a hearty appetite, necessitating the preparation of a substantial amount of food. I'm hungry. Is dinner not ready yet? Unaware of how much I was struggling, our son made self-centered demands. I'm preparing it now. Please wait a bit. What? That's useless. Don't talk to your mom like that. Be quiet. If you don't want to be complained at, do your chores properly. Our son was entering his rebellious phase and started to behave rudely towards me. I was already mentally and physically exhausted, and facing such issues only added to the hardship. Hey, can you say something? Max's behavior has been too much lately. When I brought up the issue, my husband reluctantly responded, it's natural for a son to act that way towards his mother. He'll change his attitude as he grows up. Still, since my husband didn't support me, our son thought he could get away with anything. Can you increase my allowance, Mom? It's not possible. The amount we're giving now is enough. You'll have to manage with that. What? Our life is supported by Dad. That is, while I was at a loss for words, my husband was watching me from afar. Actually, my husband had asked me to hide the fact that he was employed on a non-regular basis from our son. He wanted to maintain his pride as a father. It seemed trivial to me, but I felt it was important to him. However, seeing our son say such things, I realized that this fact was indeed affecting him. Even the income from Mom's part-time job isn't much different from mine. If I start working part-time in high school, I could earn as much as Mom does. Our son declared this and wouldn't listen to anything I said. As a result, my stress increased day by day, and it began to show in my physique. Since I needed to prepare meals for our son and husband first, I ended up eating my portion after they had finished. Consequently, eating late and the stress made it easier for me to gain weight. Gradually, I gained about 22 pounds in half a year. Although I wouldn't be considered obese, I had clearly become rounder. Our son and husband started to mock me, comparing me to a pig and laughing. Mom, you clearly can't manage yourself. Don't come to the school open day. It's embarrassing. Our son, now in middle school, became even more disrespectful. And it seemed my husband was encouraging that attitude. Hey, why did you buy a new game console? Max wanted it, so I bought it. Wait, how did you afford that? I used our joint account. Huh? Why would you do that without asking? It's fine. It's our shared funds. I'm just trying to maintain a good relationship with our son as a father. How does giving things build a good relationship? Quiet down. Enjoying games together is a form of interaction. Don't get mad over trivial things. If you're concerned, you should worry about your own figure. My husband snapped back with those words. After that, no matter what our son requested, my husband continued to provide it instantly. Our son stopped asking me for things and only asked my husband. My husband happily fulfilled our son's requests, giving him anything, but the money used came from our shared savings. There was a time when my husband contributed a bit to the savings, but the funds were depleting at a fast pace, and soon my contributions might also be exhausted. When our son entered high school, my husband started buying him expensive wallets and brand-name clothes, probably to maintain a facade for our son, providing valuable items so our son wouldn't realize that his father was a non-regular employee. However, my husband's contributions to our shared savings almost ceased, and in reality, I was covering all living expenses. My husband seemed indifferent to this fact, covering gifts for our son from the shared savings, while his allowance came from his part-time income. My husband seemed to be self-sufficient in managing money, showing no intention of contributing to the household. My father-in-law passed away a few years ago, and last year, my mother-in-law also left this world. Although their inheritance was divided, it wasn't much in reality. If my husband continues spending at this rate, our funds will eventually run out, sooner or later. Our son also wishes to go to college, which will require tuition fees. Facing such financial conditions, I felt a deep anxiety about how we would manage in the future. At that time, our son wanted an expensive watch for his birthday, costing several $1,000s. Clearly, a high school student doesn't need such an expensive item. Yet, my husband said, "That's great. Then, how about Dad buys one too and we both wear the same brand?" I couldn't stand it anymore and spoke out strongly. Look at reality. A high school student doesn't need such expensive items, and you need to start saving. We can't afford to make such purchases. When I got angry, my husband was shocked and became furious. "What did you say? You're just a wife. Don't get cocky." Our son agreed with my husband's opinion, saying, "That's right. You're just a pet pig." As our son began to mock me, my husband joined in, laughing. "You look just like an unsightly pig." "Hey, Dad, what should we do with such a pig? She doesn't earn much anyway. Indeed, we should kick out a pig that brings in little income from the house." This is how my husband and son insulted me. I had reached my breaking point. Why should I endure such treatment? I decided to leave the house with my belongings. The rest is up to them. They won't manage well without me. As I was packing, my husband and son mocked me, saying, "Good riddance to the noisy one." I didn't argue back, just silently packed my things and left the house. For the night, I stayed at a hotel and withdrew my share of the money from the bank the next morning. It was the money I had contributed to our joint account over the years. A week later, I received an angry call from my husband. I was busy, but I didn't want it to affect my work, so I reluctantly answered. "Hey, why did you withdraw money from the account? Return the money, thief." My husband was screaming, but that money was all earned by me. "It seems you're mistaken, but the funds in the joint account are not solely yours. I have been contributing my earnings every month. I withdrew my share because I didn't want it to be spent without my consent. So, the remaining amount is equivalent to what you have contributed. If nothing is left, it means you have spent all of your savings. That is, Nicole, come back." Upon hearing those words, I ended the call. Then, I immediately blocked his number. They should learn the hard way what it's like without me. For a year, I didn't return home. During that time, my husband and son contacted me numerous times. Months passed, and it seemed that my husband's part-time income was not enough to sustain their lives. Realizing their dire situation, our son demanded the truth from my husband. Eventually, my husband confessed, and since then, they had been struggling to bring me back home. I rented an apartment close to my workplace and focused on my job. As a result, I was able to lead a significant project to success. A year passed quickly as I concentrated on my work, and feeling it was time to settle things with my husband and son, I agreed to meet them. It was the moment for a final decision regarding our past relationship. When we finally met, the condition of my husband and son was pitiful. They appeared before me in a deteriorated state, their clothes ragged, hair unkempt, and it was clear they were not leading a healthy lifestyle. Since the last time I saw them, they had lost a noticeable amount of weight in a state that couldn't be considered healthy. During this time, I managed to regain my health due to the change in my living situation, losing about 22 pounds in a year and returning to my slim figure. Without making significant changes to my diet, merely putting mental distance between myself and my husband and son greatly reduced my stress. Additionally, incorporating moderate exercise into my lifestyle contributed significantly to my weight loss. My husband earnestly pleaded for me to return, but his plea did not move my heart. "Please, come back." As he begged on his knees, I responded calmly. "Such worthless pleading? What could it possibly mean? It's useless to do such a thing. I came here today to formally request a divorce," I stated clearly. At that moment, it seemed as if the color drained from the faces of my husband and son. "Wait. If we get divorced, we'll truly be left with nowhere to go," my husband pleaded desperately. Our son also said, "Yeah, I've already sold all my branded stuff for lunch money. I can't stand this poverty any longer," appealing to the severity of our current situation. However, I had already made my decision and was ready to start a new life away from my husband and son. "I have no obligation to you. You ignored me and treated me like a servant. I'm fed up with both of you. I've decided to eliminate you from my life, so I'm cutting ties completely." Our son suddenly seemed to realize something and argued back. "Then, you should pay child support. If you're divorcing Dad, you should be the one to pay." My husband agreed with our son, intensifying their demand. "That's right. Since you're the one earning, you should pay child support. Then we can agree to the divorce." They seemed to think they had played a clever hand. However, my husband and son were overlooking a crucial fact. "Actually, I'm not obligated to pay you any child support." "What? Max, you're not biologically related to me." Our son looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "Max, you are a child of his previous wife. Shortly after you were born, your biological mother disappeared and you were raised by your grandparents. I married your father when you were 2 years old. So, we have no blood relation, and I have no obligation to pay child support after the divorce." "I see. Despite that, I have loved and cared for you as my own child, but I can't take it anymore. I'm ending my marriage with this man, severing ties with you, and we're going back to being complete strangers." My declaration seemed to shock our son and husband, leaving them visibly pale. "I want you to sign the divorce papers immediately, but if that's difficult, I'll have to hire a lawyer and possibly take this to court." "Court? We can't afford that." "Then sign the divorce papers." My husband reluctantly signed the divorce papers. Afterward, I submitted the divorce documents to the city hall, and the divorce from my husband was officially finalized. My ex-husband is now juggling multiple part-time jobs, exhaustedly supporting both his son's education and their livelihood. However, due to the shock of the truth about his lies and the fact that I wasn't their biological mother, our son harbors strong resentment towards him, and their relationship has significantly deteriorated. I still receive messages from them asking for help, but I ignore them. I hope our son takes this opportunity to reflect on himself and improve his character. As for my ex-husband, even if he suffers from the consequences of his actions, I feel nothing. With these thoughts, I continue to immerse myself in my work today. For the foreseeable future, I plan to focus more on achieving results at work than on love or marriage. My name is Dorothy. I am 68 years old this year. At the end of last year, my husband, with whom I lived, suddenly passed away from cancer, and I had to move in with my eldest son, John, on short notice. Originally, my husband and I lived in the house where John and his family now reside. However, when John started his own family and had a child, We moved to a small one-room apartment nearby and gave them the house. We tried to be considerate in our own way. John runs his own business and couldn't get a mortgage due to his unstable income, so my husband decided to give them the house, thinking about the future of our grandchildren. When we handed over the house, we renovated the interior to make it as good as new. John was blessed with 3 children afterward, and we maintained a good relationship, playing with our grandchildren occasionally, and dining together at a nearby restaurant on birthdays. But when my husband was diagnosed with cancer and it was too late for treatment, he contacted John, concerned about my future, and said, "After I'm gone, please take care of Mother. Live with her." My husband asked John to live with me. I told my husband not to worry as I was still healthy and could live alone, but he wouldn't accept it. He was worried about leaving me alone. John respected his father's last wish and accepted living with me. In fact, since we gave the house to John, I had never set foot in it. Thinking that John's wife, Cindy, might mind, I refrained from visiting their house. Therefore, I encountered an unexpected sight when I arrived at the house. To avoid being a burden, I moved to John's house with minimal luggage. The house was originally a modest 4-room house with 3 rooms upstairs and 1 downstairs. John came out of the house and said, "Was today the moving day?" He seemed surprised. He's always been forgetful, and that hasn't changed even as an adult. As I entered the house, I saw a mountain of shoes and a strange smell wafting from inside. The exterior looked normal, so I was shocked. John seemed unconcerned and muttered, "Dad said so, so I accepted it. But honestly, there's no place for you to live here, Mom," as he walked inside. Reluctantly, I took off my shoes and entered the house, where I found the room on the first floor overflowing with items. The living and dining rooms I was shown were also glittered with shopping bags and trash, leaving no place to stand. It was like the trash houses I had seen on TV, and I was astonished. Despite its clean exterior, the inside was like a different world in its filthiness. When Cindy, John's wife, noticed my arrival, she got up from the sofa. "Mother, since there's no place to lay out a mattress, please find somewhere appropriate. I'm too tired from work to prepare anything," she said before lying down again. She runs a beauty salon and, according to John, makes a substantial income. As I looked at John, he said, "I'm tired from work too. Why don't you organize the room yourself and make some space?" And then he went upstairs. With no choice, I moved the items from the room to the hallway, only for Cindy to yell, "Hey, don't put things in the hallway, they're in the way." I quickly apologized and arranged them, to which she said, "It's fine to tidy up, but don't throw anything away without asking," and returned to the living room. I managed to clear a small space. I was utterly exhausted from tidying up the heavily cluttered room. Then Cindy said, "Mother, can't you at least help with preparing the meal? I'm not your maid." I responded, "Oh, it's already time for dinner, isn't it?" I got carried away with cleaning and lost track of time, and hurried to the kitchen. I was so engrossed in tidying up the room that I lost track of time. The kitchen was littered with food waste, but Cindy was busily frying a large amount of meat. When I asked if there was anything I could help with, she pointed to the dishes and said, "Can you do the washing up?" She then added in a low voice, "I was hoping that you'd consider ordering pizza or something since you suddenly came to stay with us." Pondering over her words and my own sense of propriety, I decided not to argue and replied with a smile, "Sorry about that. I was a bit busy today, but how about we order pizza tomorrow?" Cindy's mood improved and she smiled. "That sounds good. Let's do that tomorrow." I reminded myself that the mess in the house was understandable given they had 3 children, and Cindy herself worked as a beautician and manager. I realized I needed to change my mindset to adapt to living there. That evening's dinner was just a lot of grilled meat and potatoes, with no other vegetables or soup prepared. Surprisingly, despite living in a dirty house, Cindy was very particular about clothing. She would always wash clothes and towels after just one use and strictly instructed her children not to get dirty. As a result, the whole family always looked presentable when going out. and they never realized the state of the house until now. From the next day, I devoted myself to cleaning. I neatly arranged items that were unclear whether they were trash or not, and sought confirmation from Cindy when she returned from work. Due to the large amount of trash, she eventually started to respond with a disinterested, "It's okay, just throw it away," when I asked for confirmation daily. I hesitated to touch other people's things, but it was hard to see the house I once lived in so dirty and with no walking space. After a month, the trash was finally cleared and the house became orderly. With walking space now available, the house looked significantly cleaner. The grandchildren were delighted, playing on the carpet and saying, "It's like the house we see on TV." Their habit of throwing half-eaten snacks on the floor also disappeared. Though John and Cindy never thanked me, I didn't mind as I did it willingly. But I didn't know that my cleaning was actually being seen as a nuisance. Far from being grateful, Cindy felt offended by my actions, saying, "What's this, sarcasm? A mother-in-law's check." No one complained or asked for it. I accidentally overheard this during a late-night trip to the bathroom while John and Cindy were having a drink. John said, "If it weren't for Dad's words, we wouldn't have taken her in, who lives on a pension." His words were in full support of Cindy. Hearing this directly made me very sad. Wondering if there was something wrong with the way I raised him, I returned to my room unnoticed. I felt pathetic sleeping in a dark, small space surrounded by my belongings. However, thinking of my grandchildren who grew up in an unclean environment, I convinced myself that my actions were right and fell asleep. After that, whenever I cleaned, Cindy would quietly leave somewhere. Unable to bear always having meat and potatoes for meals, I proposed to Cindy, "Would it be okay if I made a stew next time? Considering my age, I need vegetables." She hysterically placed the dishes down and coldly replied, "Do as you like, but arrange the ingredients yourself." It seemed I had angered her. From then on, she left all cooking to me and stopped entering the kitchen. The grandchildren, likely deficient in vitamins, ate vegetables and fruits, saying, "It's so delicious." They started to become affectionate, asking, "Grandma, put a fried egg on the curry?" "Me too, me too." One night, when Cindy was late due to a drinking party, the grandchildren came to my mattress and slept with me. Since then, even when their parents were home, they started sleeping with me. This probably irritated Cindy even more. Having the children become attached to their grandmother might not have been pleasant for her. Eventually, I ended up preparing all the meals. About half a year after that, the summer holidays began, and the family started planning a vacation. Without saying anything to me, John and Cindy, along with the children, were looking at brochures and searching online. It was clear from their behavior and attitude that they had no intention of taking me with them. Honestly, even if they did, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I decided to enjoy my role in taking care of the house in their absence. However, my eldest grandchild suddenly asked, "Grandma is coming too, right?" The expressions of John and Cindy were complicated, but as the grandchild insisted on my joining, it was decided that I would go along. Cindy, seemingly displeased, said, "Since we'll go early, please prepare everyone's breakfast and do the laundry. It's only natural since we're taking you." Therefore, I woke up at 4 a.m. to prepare the meals and do the laundry. On the car journey, I needed frequent bathroom breaks due to my age, and whenever we entered the highway, I had to ask, "Sorry, could we stop for a break?" Several times. John and Cindy, eager to reach the destination, could barely hide their irritation at the crowded rest stops. The grandchild who wanted me to come also became impatient, saying, "Let's go quickly." John scolded, "It's your fault," which startled the grandchild into crying loudly. With the added traffic congestion, the mood in the car worsened, and Cindy kept complaining, "We spent so much money for this, and it's terrible." It was hard enough for me to get a break. Upon reaching the amusement park, I said, "I'll wait at the cafe while everyone enjoys themselves," and distanced myself. After the children regained their spirits and ran off to the playgrounds, Cindy returned and said, "Please pay for your own expenses," adding another layer of discomfort. With no facilities for the elderly at the amusement park and the cafe getting crowded, I decided to sit on a bench outside. I had taken precautions against the sun, but the summer heat was intense, and the next thing I knew, I was in the amusement park's medical room. I overheard a doctor-like person scolding John and Cindy, saying, "How could you neglect an elderly person like this?" It seemed I had a mild heat stroke. The early morning lunch preparation, laundry, and long car ride seemed to have affected my poor health. John and Cindy, looking annoyed, took me back to the hotel. After checking in, they led me to my room, saying, "Please don't cause any more trouble, and we really shouldn't have brought you. We're going out for the night, so eat something before leaving for the amusement park again." Feeling dizzy, I laid myself down. Alone in the quiet hotel, I began to question what I was doing. Usually, I was busy caring for my grandchildren and doing housework without much time to think. The vacation planning lacked consideration for me, and no one cared that I fell ill after being overwhelmed with early morning tasks. I was lying down there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was right. I thought that if I were to collapse in the future, they would probably neglect me just as they had now. Even though I did housework, I was treated as a nuisance. As a mother who had given birth to a son, I realized that I had been harboring expectations, but that was a mistake. I fell asleep pondering whether I should make a decision. Later on, around 6 p.m., I heard my grandchildren's voices asking, "Grandma, are you okay?" They seemed to have returned early from the amusement park because they were worried about me. John and Cindy were whispering in the background, sounding displeased. Cindy then said, "Kids, go outside. I'll talk to her and let the children go out to the hotel's playground." Then Cindy began, "Mother, please stop. Don't you think it's extravagant for an elderly person to travel? Shouldn't someone living on a pension stay home and clean? You're good at cleaning, right?" she said accusingly. The trip was planned for 2 nights and 3 days, and we were supposed to go back to the amusement park the next day. The final day was scheduled for a trick art exhibition and a museum tour, which I thought I could participate in. However, when I asked, "Do I have to leave right now?" John replied irritably, "What else is there?" He vented, "What am I supposed to do now? The plans are ruined. Honestly, I only took you in because of Dad's will, but I can't stand the idea of you having fun for free." Those words solidified the vague decision I had in my mind. I realized I should sever ties with them. I stood up and said I understand, gathered my belongings, went to the front desk, and asked for a taxi. When my grandchildren noticed me, I thought of it as a final farewell and said, "Grandma isn't feeling well, so I'm going home early. You guys have fun," and patted their heads. They seemed to sense something was wrong but couldn't articulate it and just said, "Get well soon," with a smile. I got into the taxi, gave the driver my home address, and he expressed concern about the long-distance fare. I showed him my platinum card and said, "I'll pay with this." He thanked me and started driving quietly to avoid making me feel sick. Upon arriving home, I immediately began cleaning. This time, the cleaning seemed to be quite extensive. The condominium I used to live in was up for rent, but fortunately, no tenant had been found yet, so I was able to return right away. The next day, I packed my things, left John and Cindy's house, and contacted a real estate agent. I said, "I want to let go of that house." After a week, John, apparently having trouble with the real estate agent who came for the appraisal, called me furiously. I visited their house and quietly said, "I've decided to end our relationship here. That's why I'm selling this house. It's essential to discard unnecessary things when cleaning, after all." John and Cindy looked puzzled. "This is Dad's house, right? It all became mine through inheritance." John argued. Cindy, in a fit of anger, said, "Exactly. This is my husband's property. What are you doing on your own?" Sighing, I asked, "You inherited it, but do you remember changing the house's title?" John replied, "I don't remember, but I thought it automatically became mine. That's not the case. This house is in my name." I explained, and they looked shocked. "What do you mean?" They asked. That's what I mean. Also, this marks the end of the financial aid to your company, I declared. Financial aid? Was I getting loans from you, Mom? John was astonished. I knew about John's forgetfulness, but I didn't expect it to be this severe. Have you forgotten? We deposited funds into your account every month for your business. We had a contract for that, I explained. John turned pale. I thought that money was earned by Cindy, he said, looking dumbfounded. Cindy also looked shocked, confronting John. You thought that money was earned by me? I thought it was yours. Initially, when John was struggling for funds in his early marriage, I decided to invest in his business for the sake of my grandchildren. To avoid it being seen as inheritance, I set up a personal asset management company for the investment. I had explained this clearly to John, but it seemed he mistook it for Cindy's income. Our company's name coincidentally resembled that of Cindy's beauty salon, causing the confusion. Suddenly, John asked, "Wait a minute. You mean the investments continued even after Dad passed away? Isn't that Dad's company?" "I am the president of that company," I said. He looked at me as if he couldn't believe it. Cindy, too, was agape with astonishment. For the sake of your father's honor, I kept silent, but actually, that asset was mine. My parents were wealthy, I revealed calmly. We had married against my parents' wishes, almost like eloping. John had never met my grandparents, but as time passed, we reconciled. When they passed away, I inherited their assets. This was a distinct property, not part of the communal assets with my husband, but my personal property. Wait, so Dad didn't own it? John asked, stunned. Right, as I've said multiple times, Dad didn't leave much inheritance. I explained. It might have been natural for John and Cindy to assume it was his dad's inheritance from a general perspective. However, their belief that they received the inheritance without any formalities showed a lack of thought on John's part as a son. Originally, John started his own business because he was fired from every company he worked at. Nobody understands my talent, he would rant. We were puzzled about how to support him. Not wanting him to squander the inheritance on frivolities, we provided him with capital and loans. John, misunderstanding it as Cindy's income, had exhausted it on living expenses and business funds. Cindy's beauty salon wasn't doing well either, and her income was minimal. Yet, she seemed to be relying on John's supposed income. I thought I would inherit this house. I just followed Dad's instructions. John expressed his anger. Wait, this house isn't in your name? I thought it was already bought because it was renovated. Cindy was furious. Disappointed by their attitudes, I said, from now on, manage your affairs by yourselves, and prepared to leave. At that moment, Cindy grabbed my shoulder tightly and said with a mix of anger and anxiety, "Wait a minute. Don't you care about your cute grandchildren? What about us? Using grandchildren as a threat? How low can you go?" I firmly said, "You can't choose your parents. Maybe there were problems with the way I raised you, but I'm done coddling. That's best for the grandchildren too," and I left the scene. Behind me, I could hear John and Cindy raising their voices. John said, "It's your fault." And Cindy retorted, "What are you talking about? You're to blame too." Eventually, the house was sold and John's business failed due to a lack of funds, leading to their divorce. They gave up custody, and I ended up taking care of the grandchildren. John and Cindy then became incommunicado, and I have no idea where they are or what they're doing now. Under my guidance, the grandchildren learned valuable household skills. The eldest learned to cook, the middle child mastered cleaning, and the youngest got good at organizing. They are learning the importance of handling their affairs themselves. Now, they collaborate and complete the housework without my intervention. They will live their lives, learning from their parents' failures. I am happy that I could teach my grandchildren important values. Balancing their studies and housework, they also take care of me, and we are living peaceful days now.